Jake always believed the fastest way to become wealthy was by earning a bigger paycheck. Every year, he worked harder, hoped for a promotion, and celebrated every raise as if it brought him one step closer to financial freedom. Then, something unexpected happened. While organizing his finances one quiet Sunday morning, he noticed two numbers sitting side by side on his computer screen. One showed the total amount he had earned from his job over the past year. The other showed how much his net worth had increased during that same period. To his surprise, his net worth had grown by even more than his salary. Jake stared at the screen, wondering how that was possible. He hadn't started a business, inherited money, or won the lottery. The answer had been quietly building for years. That single moment completely changed the way he viewed work, money, and success. Today, we're following Jake's journey to discover what happens when your net worth begins growing faster than your salary, and why that's the moment many ordinary Americans quietly become truly wealthy. Level 1. Salary pays the bills. Jake looked at his banking app the same way he did every payday. His salary had arrived, and for a brief moment his account balance looked healthy. But within days, the mortgage payment cleared, utility bills disappeared, groceries filled the kitchen, insurance premiums were deducted, and the remaining balance shrank faster than he expected. Month after month, the routine never changed. His income was enough to live comfortably, but it never seemed to create real financial progress. One Saturday afternoon, while meeting an old college friend for coffee, Jake noticed something unusual. His friend earned a similar salary, yet he had recently taken a 3-month break to travel with his family without worrying about money. Curious, Jake asked how he managed it. His friend smiled and replied, "My paycheck pays my bills, but my assets pay for my freedom." Those words stayed with Jake all weekend. That evening, he opened his investment account instead of his checking account. For the first time, he realized his salary only worked while he was working. His investments, however, had quietly grown every single day without asking for overtime or another promotion. Jake understood that chasing a bigger paycheck alone would never make him financially free. Real wealth begins when part of every paycheck stops being spent and starts becoming an asset. From that day forward, every raise had a new purpose, not to upgrade his lifestyle, but to increase his ownership. It was the first time Jake realized his salary was simply the fuel, while his net worth would eventually become the engine of his future. Level 2. Investments. Get a raise. Jake didn't expect anything unusual when he opened his investment account one Sunday morning. He simply wanted to make his monthly contribution before heading out for the day. But one number immediately caught his attention. Over the past 12 months, his portfolio had grown by more than he had personally invested. For the first time, his money had earned more than his own savings. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. Every paycheck had always felt like the reward for his hard work, but this growth came while he was sleeping, spending time with family, or enjoying weekends. His investments had quietly continued working, even when he wasn't. That realization changed the way he viewed money forever. Instead of celebrating every salary increase, Jake became excited whenever he could buy another piece of an asset that would continue growing long after his paycheck was spent. Months later, while co-workers proudly talked about upgrading their cars after receiving bonuses, Jake used his bonus to invest instead. No one noticed because nothing about his lifestyle had changed. He still lived in the same house, drove the same reliable car, and packed lunch for work several days a week. But beneath the surface, Something remarkable was happening. Every investment contribution was like hiring another employee who never slept, never complained, and never asked for a raise. Jake finally understood that the goal wasn't simply to earn more money. The real goal was to own assets that could earn money on his behalf. From that day on, every dollar he invested became another small step toward financial independence. His salary still paid the bills, but his investments had started building something much more valuable, a future where his wealth could continue growing without depending entirely on the hours he worked. That was the moment Jake realized his paycheck had stopped being his only source of progress. His money had finally learned how to work for him. Level 3. Net worth overtakes salary. Jake was reviewing his finances at the end of the year when one number made him stop scrolling. His investment portfolio had increased by more than his entire annual salary. He checked it again, convinced there had to be a mistake, but the numbers were real. During the same year, he had worked full-time, attended meetings, met deadlines, and commuted every weekday. His assets had quietly generated even more wealth than his job. It was a moment he had never imagined. A few days later, he met an old co-worker for lunch. The conversation quickly turned to work, promotions, and salaries. His friend proudly shared news of another raise, but admitted he was still feeling financially stretched because of a larger mortgage, 2 car loans, and rising monthly expenses. Jake smiled politely, but inside he realized they were measuring success in completely different ways. His friend was focused on increasing income, while Jake had been focused on increasing ownership. One chased a bigger paycheck every year. The other had spent years building assets that continued growing regardless of how many hours he worked. Driving home that evening, Jake thought about how dramatically his perspective had changed. Years ago, he believed a higher salary was the only path to financial success. Now he understood that income was temporary, but ownership could keep creating value long after a paycheck was spent. His investments didn't ask for vacation time, sick leave, or overtime pay. They continued working through weekends, holidays, and even while he slept. That realization gave him a sense of confidence he had never experienced before. For the first time, Jake understood that real wealth isn't measured by how much you earn each year. It's measured by how much your assets can earn without you. His salary still mattered, but it was no longer the most powerful number in his financial life. His growing net worth had quietly become the engine driving his future, proving that the greatest financial milestone isn't getting a bigger paycheck. It's reaching the day when your wealth begins working harder than you do. Level 4. Salary becomes optional. Jake never imagined he would turn down the highest-paying job offer of his career. The recruiter promised a massive salary increase, a bigger annual bonus, and executive benefits that most people only dreamed about. Years earlier, he would have accepted without thinking twice. But this time, instead of asking, "How much does it pay?" he found himself asking, "How much of my life will it cost?" The position required constant travel, late-night meetings, and weekends away from home. That evening, Jake sat quietly on his back porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. He thought about the years he had spent building his investment portfolio instead of upgrading his lifestyle. Those quiet decisions had changed everything. His investments now generated enough income to cover a large portion of his monthly expenses. For the first time, he realized his salary was no longer responsible for carrying his entire life. It had become just one piece of a much bigger financial picture. The next morning, Jake thanked the recruiter and respectfully declined the offer. His friends couldn't understand why anyone would reject so much money. But Jake understood something they didn't. Financial freedom isn't the ability to buy anything you want. It's the ability to say no without fear. Instead of chasing another promotion, he chose a role with flexible hours, more vacations, and evenings at home with his family. He attended birthday parties without checking work emails, coached his son's baseball team, and took long road trips with his wife without worrying about using vacation days. Every moment reminded him that wealth wasn't giving him more luxury, it was giving him more life. Jake finally realized that the greatest return on his investments wasn't measured in dollars, it was measured in time. Time that no employer could demand, no meeting could interrupt, and no paycheck could ever replace. Level 5. Generational Wealth. Years passed, and Jake found himself thinking less about growing his bank account and more about growing his family's future. One rainy afternoon, while organizing old documents at home, he discovered the very first investment statement he had ever printed. The balance was so small that he laughed, remembering how proud he had been back then. Looking around his home now, he realized those tiny monthly investments had quietly transformed into something far greater than money. They had created opportunity. His children graduated from college without carrying heavy student loans. His parents received better medical care without financial stress. When his niece wanted to start a small business, Jake became her first investor instead of simply wishing her good luck. Wealth had stopped being personal. It had become a tool for changing other people's lives. One evening, while sitting around the dinner table, his grandson asked him how he had become successful. Jake smiled and replied, "I didn't become wealthy because I earned more than everyone else. I became wealthy because I kept buying things that kept growing after I bought them." That simple lesson stayed with the family long after dinner ended. Jake understood that houses could be sold, businesses could change, and careers would eventually end. But the habits that built wealth could continue for generations. His greatest accomplishment wasn't leaving behind a large inheritance. It was leaving behind financial knowledge that could help his family make smarter decisions long after he was gone. At that moment, Jake realized the true purpose of wealth wasn't to create a better lifestyle for one person. It was to create better opportunities for generations that followed. Jake spent most of his life believing that a bigger paycheck was the answer to financial freedom. But over time, he discovered something far more valuable. A salary can support your lifestyle, but it can never guarantee your future. The moment your net worth grows faster than your salary, your financial life begins to change forever. Your investments start working while you sleep. Your assets create opportunities that your paycheck never could. Eventually, money gives you something far more valuable than luxury. It gives you choices, freedom, and peace of mind. The people who quietly build lasting wealth aren't always the highest earners. They're the ones who consistently turn income into ownership, year after year. Remember, every dollar has a job. You can spend it once or you can invest it and let it work for you for the rest of your life.